I have a confession to make. I'm like the world's slowest reader, which is the worst possible thing for someone in my job. I will read about 3 books a year. That's how slow I am. Usually, these days I kind of end up reading a book because I have to, because there's a sort of a deadline where, you know, and the book has somehow self-announced itself, like I've got to read a book next week because I've been asked to direct an adaptation, you know, like direct it if it gets made as a film in China. So, you know, like, so then, you know, I've got a great interest in reading that book. But, you know, what tends to happen for Matchbox is because the company is quite big and we're all really time poor, we'll get some readership done on a book now. And if the book is relatively unknown, it's harder to sell a book that hasn't had a huge market presence. But if we fall in love with the material in the book, and there's something about the book which we really connect to, we'll take it on regardless of how many copies it sells. But certainly, it's much easier, you know, because we're in a commercial business, to sell a book that has, you know, bestseller on the cover.
In Matchbox, there is, as Tony mentioned before, Debbie Lee is the head of scripted, and she works very closely with her sort of right hand Warren. And when ideas come to the company, they're the port that things go to. If you've got an agent and the material comes through an agent, certainly it's much easier. We do have a general policy of not accepting unsolicited material, and that's just because we get so much, as you can imagine. And if it comes with some sort of authority, if you can find a way for it to come with some sort of authority, it's much, much better. But that said, I think, you know, we're in the business of great stories. We're in the business of great ideas. And if you've got a great idea, we do want to hear it because that's our job. So, you know, you can always try your luck. Would you say that's...
Yeah, I think absolutely that. It's so hard to say. I mean, for me, it's always about your emotional connection to the material. So if it's something that really moves me, or I find, you know, thrilling, something that kind of gets your heart racing, something that affects you, because ultimately, weirdly enough for me, it doesn't necessarily have to be whether it's internal or external or anything like that, because sometimes I personally find the challenge of doing something that looks virtually unadaptable. Really, you know, perversely I like that, but it's actually the feeling that you have when you read the book and then you carry it with you and you sort of, you know, you don't forget it. Then for me, that's the thing, because projects take so long to make that unless something has a really deep impact, you know, it's going to sort of somehow wash away over time. You know, it fades away, and so something that affects you profoundly is more likely to be there. You know, you're still going to have that profound effect when you find a way to translate it and realise it.
I mean, I think that's a pretty amazing summary of I think that passion that Tony was talking about is really important, whatever it is, you know, and that's sort of undefinable. I mean, if you were going to break it down, maybe it would be, you know, great story, great characters, unique voice, something like that, but it is a little bit of an X factor.
No. We've got a really amazing track record with adaptations so far. Can you think of one?
Yeah, no, I can't. No, I can't.
Get in with those guys.
I guess I mean, maybe that's the process I was talking about before, that's something that we were more uncertain about might just be a shopping letter. And if we're going to go and invest in creating an option agreement with you, the time and money and energy that takes, then, you know, the company would have a a very good feeling that it was something that could be made.
And we don't do a lot of books, so you know, it's not as though we have 20 books that we're doing. We only take on things that we really feel strongly about, and so far we've been very successful with them. Our company is owned by NBC Universal, who are a distributor, and they distribute all of our work. And we basically, everything we make has to be for an international market. But ironically, what seems to be the case with the world at the moment is that the more specific, the more particular something is, the more it can travel. You know, for instance, again using the family law as an example, the family law, which is, you know, a Chinese family set on the Sunshine Coast, is NBCU's favourite comedy that they've got at the moment, and they absolutely love it, and they're really going to work very hard to sell it and format it internationally, and you know, they're going to put a lot of resources in it, and they're one of the biggest distributors in the world.
I probably need to go back even further before the family law, really, because I wasn't really writing about my family much to begin with. I wanted to be like a music journalist. I think I saw Almost Famous and thought, that's the life I want. And it was when I started writing for a magazine called Frankie, which has become a much bigger magazine than what it started out as. But Frankie really required the writers to write a lot of first-person funny stuff. And I guess at the time I was reading a lot of David Sedaris. And you know, David Sedaris' work sort of spoke to me because, you know, he's from a different generation, but he's also a gay guy from a big, sprawling, hilarious family with a really remarkable mother figure as well. And so I sort of started writing in that vein for Frankie. And from that, there was a call out for an anthology called Growing Up Asian in Australia. I submitted to that. Alice Pong was the editor. And when I submitted to that, I submitted 2 stories, and they became the first stories I ever wrote for the family law because the publisher said, do you have any more? So it was this sort of really happy accident that the deal came about. So I wrote the book, and I think all of us write sort of blindly. We're not really thinking about what it's going to look like in book form, who's going to read it. But then when I submitted it and the edits came through, my family largely approved of what I'd written, that's when I sort of had a bit of a freak out, actually, because, you know, when you're describing the book, Tony, it's like it's a Chinese family on the Sunshine Coast in the 90s, and the parents' marriages weren't, like, it didn't really feel like it spoke to that many people, but I think from all of those different elements, that's why it resonated. It resonated with people who'd grown up in Queensland, resonated with people who are children of divorce, resonated with Chinese Australians, so that was a happy surprise. And then yeah, I met Michael McMahon, who is Tony's partner, and we had a big chat, and I don't know, I guess that's how the book fell into your hands. And then you guys took me out to dinner, drugged me, no, and it was great. You know, I just remembered it was like dinner with the 2 of you, me and my boyfriend as well, and we just talked. And I mean, like I said before, I was a fan of Tony's work for a really long time, but I think one of the things that I've learned in this process of writing TV, because I'm new to it, I mean, I studied it for my postgrad, but I hadn't done it really that professionally, and now I was writing it. But one thing that I've learned is that there are so many hands on deck that making a TV show is essentially forming a community, really, and there are so many different creative people involved that it's this kind of miracle when everyone is working on the same show and we're laughing at the same jokes and we're finding pretty bleak things hilarious and everyone's got a really great attitude, or, you know, everyone just sort of shares the same value system, which sounds very old-fashioned. But from that very first moment when we were even talking to Michael and Tony, they just felt like people I wanted to be around a lot. That's great because you're going to work with these people as well, and they curated a team essentially that became fun to work with too. Yeah, I got a lot more disciplined. I think all of us as writers, whether you work in non-fiction or fiction, you're pretty used to a lot of edits, but you get them pretty thick and fast in TV writing. And the great thing, especially having worked as a journalist, you get less romantic about the editing process. It becomes, you build a callus, and that was really handy because it's not personal, but we've got to get this right. I remember when we were developing the show, what we really wanted to do first and foremost was to get the drama of it, the pathos, the emotion of it. And sometimes we'd write these devastating scenes, like that just left all of us in the room. Like when we reached the plot point where we knew how to end that scene or end the episode, we were just gutted. And we're like, that's really good TV, but it's not comedy. We're going to have to work out how to make that funny, or we'll have to work out a way to undercut it or something. So to make something funny, like sometimes that would be the note. This just needs to be funnier somehow, and that can be really hard, and that was such a huge challenge to do that. So I guess in answer to your question, one thing was getting used to like a huge volume of edits and doing them within a timely manner. That was something that I had to learn. The other thing was just responding to, just like you had no choice, you just had to work to a note, work it through, come up with a million options until one stuck. So that doggedness I had to learn about as well. And I guess the other thing is just learning about those fundamentals like 3-act structure, because we're writing for SBS, so there are commercial breaks as well, so it's very much broken into 3 parts, and you don't really have that luxury of sort of musing on a bit. Like TV's so economical that I actually think, I've been talking about it with my novelist friends a lot, but I think if anyone writes fiction especially, being in a TV writer's room, because you learn the craft sort of inside out from another angle as well. And I guess the other thing that I learned was learning to write in a group, how to sit around in a room and throw ideas at a board until something works all together, because writing, in my experience, has been a pretty solitary experience. It freaked me out for a while, how to actually communicate. Oh, man, I think this. Oh, no, I don't think it. No, don't listen to me. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. But it took me a long time to work out how that worked. And but it's been, once you build that skill, it's actually a really fun thing to do.
One of the great delights of many working with Ben Law is the fact that he was so up for that journey. And the showrunner of the show, my fellow producer, Sophie Miller, was really, she really ran the story, and she is a dog with a bone, isn't she? Like in the best way possible, she will not give up on a script until she is 100% happy, and she will just send it back, and have conversations, and but it really is in that way. Like television writing is much more a team sport, and it has to be egoless really for it to work. But hopefully you're working with people who you really respect, so you feel the work's getting better. And also in that process, you get notes not only from your producers and your script editor, but also from the network. They're the people who are paying the bill at the end of the day. And so even, they're notes that you have to engage with in some way, whether it's, there's also space to go back and say, look, it doesn't quite work and this is the reason, but, they need to be engaged with. There's a lot of voices.
Yeah. Can I just add something to that? I was having a really good chat with Deborah Bianciotti, I think is how you pronounce her last name, and Margot Lanigan. They've just written that new New York Times bestseller with Scott Westerfeld. And when I started doing TV writing, and when I started getting really excited about the writer's room, I was having this conversation with them, and it's like, oh my God, we've discovered TV writing as well, because what they were doing was applying the TV model of writing, which was collaborative writing, to the novel writing process. And they're writing science fiction and fantasy. And through because they're 3 individually remarkable writers, but it's made me think, since being a part of this experience, why don't more writers do that, whether they're writing non-fiction or fiction? Like, where does the action come into it? What is the truth of this character? How should we start this scene? And then break it down from there. I think by having all of these great minds in the room together, like Kirsty Fisher was my script editor, and we'd have these amazing ideas, and then Kirsty would be that one person in the room, and it's just like, that chronology can't exist in space and time for these reasons, and none of us picked up on it. And I just thought, oh my God, if you weren't here, we would have never picked up on that. Or Sophie was the one who just like, yeah, but remember, like the character isn't like that, so why would they behave that way? I'm like, oh my God, if you weren't here. Like every moment it's constantly, I could have fallen down a cellar door if it wasn't for you. So that's been really gratifying, just seeing how teams have each other's backs.